Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're looking at one of the most fascinating and heavily debated mysteries of our ancient past. For a really long time, the story of human history was written as this simple, triumphant narrative. It basically went like this. Homo sapiens arrived in Europe, we were vastly superior, and we just completely outclassed the local Neanderthals. Boom, end of story. But as modern archaeology digs deeper into the dirt and into the DNA, that neat little story is completely unraveling. So we're going to examine the evidence today and ask a highly provocative question about our ancestors. Okay, let's dive right into this. When you hear the phrase stolen technology, what's the first thing that pops into your head? It's probably modern corporate espionage, right? Stealing blueprints, hacking servers, ripping off a smartphone design. But we are actually applying that exact same concept to a 50,000-year-old interaction. Did the newcomers to Europe, our ancestors, the ones we famously remember as these prehistoric technological geniuses, arrive, take a look at what the local Neanderthals were doing, and quietly think to themselves, yeah, we should absolutely pretend we invented that? To understand why archaeologists are even asking this, let's look at a tool called the lassois. This is a carefully shaped animal rib that's been ground down to a smooth, curved tip. And it wasn't just some random bone they used once and tossed aside. No, it was a highly standardized tool specifically designed for working animal hides, rubbing them to make them softer and more water-resistant. But what's really interesting here is who actually made it. 4 of these tools were found in France in dirt layers securely belonging to Neanderthals, and they date to before comparable bone tools became widespread among incoming Homo sapiens. It raises a really uncomfortable possibility. Did we basically just copy their homework? Now, to really grasp what's at stake here, we kind of need to redefine a word. We need to rescue the word technology from the modern office where it's been trapped. Technology isn't just electronics or jet engines or, resetting your Wi-Fi password. An ancient, perfectly prepared stone core, that is technology. So is a well-balanced wooden spear. Think about what it takes to transform a stiff, decaying animal skin into flexible clothing that can keep a child alive through a freezing ice age winter. That is incredibly complex technology. It requires this immense accumulated knowledge of physics, chemistry, and materials that you simply do not just discover by accident before breakfast. And this brilliantly illustrates just how capable Neanderthals really were. Get this number in your head, 190,000. Up to 190,000 years ago, Neanderthals in Europe were already manufacturing birch bark tar so they could glue stone tools to handles. And birch bark doesn't just naturally offer up a convenient lump of black glue. It has to be carefully heated and transformed in a highly controlled way without burning away all the useful material. Neanderthals weren't just finding sticky stuff in the woods, they were intentionally manufacturing chemical adhesives hundreds of thousands of years ago. And the evidence just keeps building. Over at a site called Abri du Marais in France, researchers found a tiny fragment of 3-ply cord still attached to a stone flake, dating somewhere between 41,000 and 52,000 years ago. To make this, inner bark fibers were separated, twisted into strands, and then twisted in the exact opposite direction to make a stronger cord. It's literally just a few millimeters long, but it implies a massive, totally invisible category of technology. Because think about it. Once you know how to make a cord, you can build nets, fashion traps, tie shelter frames together, and carry heavy loads. So the absolutely crucial point here is what we cannot see today. Think about all those perishable technologies. Wood, fiber, hide, bark, woven nets. These things all rot away. Stone, on the other hand, survives beautifully. And because stone is usually all we find, the archaeological record artificially exaggerates the importance of stone and severely undercounts the incredible skills Neanderthals likely had with all these other materials. When Homo sapiens later made nets or baskets, we literally can't compare them to the Neanderthal versions because the Neanderthal versions simply didn't survive the millennia.
Section 1. The Shuttle-Peronian Debate. Who invented what?
Let's fast forward to the final millennia of Neanderthals in Western Europe, where we suddenly start seeing this very distinct mix of artifacts. At sites like Grotte du Rhin and Saint-Césaire, archaeologists unearthed shell beads, pigments, and personal ornaments made from teeth and ivory, found right alongside backed stone knives and Neanderthal remains. And yes, modern dating and protein analysis have securely linked these ornaments directly to Neanderthals. Now, a bead might seem pretty simple to us, but socially it is vastly complex. It means you are modifying an object specifically to display it, to signal your identity or status to others. It completely proves that Neanderthals engaged in complex symbolic communication. So where on earth did they get these ornaments and advanced tools? Well, archaeologists basically have 2 competing models. First, there's the acculturation model. This suggests that incoming Homo sapiens brought these ideas with them, and Neanderthals saw them, maybe through trade or just passing contact, and selectively adopted them. On the other side, you have the independent innovation model. This argues that Neanderthals developed these tools and ornaments entirely on their own, from their own local traditions, possibly because of population pressures or internal social changes, long before any meaningful contact with modern humans even happened.
Actually, there is a fantastic point to make here about all this. Even if that first model is true, even if Neanderthals did just copy Homo sapiens, we shouldn't view that as some sort of lack of intelligence. Successfully copying a completely foreign technology, adapting it to your own cultural traditions, and then teaching it across generations, that requires highly advanced cultural intelligence. As one of our sources brilliantly put it, anyone who has watched a relative fail to connect a printer should approach prehistoric learning with a whole lot of humility.
But hold on, before we go around declaring anyone a prehistoric thief, we really have to understand the concept of equifinality. This is just the idea that completely different pathways can produce the exact same result. Because at the end of the day, physics is physics, no matter who happens to be holding the stone. Animal ribs naturally have the perfect curve for rubbing hides. Plant fibers literally have to be twisted to make strong string. Human hands confronting the exact same raw materials might just independently converge on the exact same answers. So seeing similar tools does not automatically prove copying.
So it all really boils down to this key question. Does the entire chain of actions match, or just that final shape? If archaeologists want to prove actual technology transfer, they can't just look at the outer silhouette of a finished tool. They have to look at the invisible manufacturing sequences. How exactly was the stone core prepared? What specific mistakes were made along the way? Two stone knives can look completely identical to the naked eye, but be made using entirely different mental templates. It's that hidden process that reveals true copying.
Now, if we zoom out and look at the chronology to see if copying was even geographically possible, we quickly realize that the arrival of Homo sapiens wasn't this clean, immediate replacement. Neanderthals were making tar 190,000 years ago. They were making those lassoirs 50,000 years ago. Homo sapiens only start showing up around 45,000 years ago, meaning these two populations overlapped in Europe for thousands of years. It was a really messy overlap. They didn't even need to live in the same cave. Objects and ideas could easily move through long chains of trade or intermarriage over dozens of generations.
Plus, we know for an absolute fact that they interacted intimately. The biological evidence literally proves it. Genetic sequencing from sites like Bochokiro in Bulgaria reveals that some of the earliest Homo sapiens in Europe actually had recent Neanderthal ancestors, meaning interbreeding had occurred just a few generations earlier. And today, as you might know, modern human populations outside Africa still carry Neanderthal DNA. If biology itself crossed the boundary between these two groups, it is almost a guarantee that tools and ideas cross that boundary too.
What is truly fascinating here is how this flips the conversation from raw intelligence to demography. Neanderthal populations were generally pretty small and isolated. Now, a small group can invent absolutely brilliant things, but if a harsh winter wipes out just one extended family, that amazing innovation might be lost forever. Homo sapiens, however, had much larger, more connected networks. We essentially had cultural backups. We exposed more people to more ideas, which provided greater cumulative stability over time. The difference between a brilliant solitary inventor and an enduring civilization is often simply how well you can store and pass on information. So why on earth did scholars resist this idea of Neanderthal brilliance for so long? Honestly, it largely comes down to a lingering 19th century bias. Early researchers operated on this rigid hierarchy of progress. They framed Neanderthals as primitive, slow, violent, and ultimately doomed, essentially viewing them as the biological rough draft that our superior species came along to correct. And because of that deep prejudice, anytime a highly sophisticated object was found with Neanderthal bones, scholars just assumed the dirt layers were mixed up by accident, or that Neanderthals just mindlessly aped the superior humans.
Section 2. Sharing, not stealing, the prehistoric exchange of knowledge.
In the Paleolithic world, knowledge spread organically. When contact allowed it, people just naturally watched each other, traded with each other, and raised mixed families together. A child raised in a mixed community could easily learn a specific technique from a Neanderthal grandparent and then use it throughout their Homo sapiens adult life. So, to wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty powerful thought. If we didn't replace Neanderthals without taking pieces of their genome, we probably didn't replace them without taking pieces of their technology, too. But the greatest shared technology might not have been a bone tool or a batch of glue. The deepest Neanderthal invention that Homo sapiens preserved was likely the very human habit of watching another person solve a problem and remembering it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the past.